What's up, you guys? It's your host, Eric McAvoy here with another episode going into buying your first property, and this is part 2. So, buying your first property. Remember, this is, if you haven't watched part 1, go back and watch that and or listen to it if you're doing podcasting. But now, after part 1, we've officially found our property that we want to buy. And so now, once you've found it, these are kind of the steps you want to take, and then you're going from there. So, step 1, making an offer. This is kind of the most fun part in my experience. You get to kind of get with your agent, like, okay, what should we offer? What should we negotiate? Should we make a contingent on things? One thing that I've learned in my experience so far is everything is negotiable. So keep that in mind when you're making an offer. Don't think that you have to, do whatever the seller wants. Especially if it's a buyer's market, meaning that the buyer has more power than the seller. And that just happens when there's more supply than there's demand. So making an offer, I would highly recommend making it contingent on the appraisal and the inspection. Not the appraisal, just the inspection. So when it's contingent on the inspection, that means your offer is dependent on or rests on, a certain outcome coming from the inspection. So let's just say you find a house that's listed for whatever, $200,000, and you make an offer for $175 or whatever, but it's contingent on the inspection, meeting your standards. If the roof is about to cave in, you can say, okay, well, I'm going to back out, or I'll offer you $150 because of what the inspection revealed. You could say, I'm going to back out, I'll pay you $150, or you fix the roof and then I'll pay you the $175. So when you're making an offer, don't forget to work in those contingencies. And definitely, obviously you want to talk to your agent about things like that. But the big things you want to watch out for on inspections are what's called capital expenditures. And those are the big repairs that are going to come up in every home at some time or another. So things like the roof, things like a water heater, HVAC system, plumbing, electrical, those kind of big overarching issues or big overarching systems. If something goes wrong with that, that's going to be a very expensive fix. Whereas, if you go in and see there's some chipped paint, that's not that big of a deal. You can just grab a paintbrush and paint over it. I've done that many a time. It's really not that challenging. But if the HVAC system's about to die and it's a decent sized home, that's probably, $4,000 to $6,000 in repairs. Water heaters, I actually just had to replace one about a month ago. That was $3,200. So little things like that, just be on the lookout for them. Not little things, big things like that, be on the lookout for them in the inspection. And also, one thing to note when you're making an offer, I know last episode we talked about closing costs and how those are bundled into the down payment. I would highly recommend, and what I always try and do, is have the seller pay closing costs. Reason being is you're out of pocket less money up front, which then increases your return on investment or your ROI. Really it's just, you can, like what I would say to do is either, offer them a low price or like underneath what they're asking and they cover closing, or what you can do, and it's kind of a sales tactic that, almost every salesperson uses, is instead of giving the seller one option saying, I'll pay you $175 and you cover closing costs, you can say, I'll pay you $175 and you cover closing costs, or I'll pay you, $165 and I don't cover closing costs, or whatever it is. Those are just arbitrary numbers, but that way the seller can then go pick in between the two versus just saying yes or no to one of them. And with the seller, when they sell the home, they just basically, like, the closing costs just get taken out of the money that they're getting. So it doesn't affect them as much as the buyer, I would say, just because, especially if you're trying to house hack and do a 5% down payment, and then out of nowhere there's another 3 to 5% from closing costs, that's percentage-wise, that's a large difference in how much money you have to bring to the table. So I always try and get the seller to pay closing costs. I don't feel like paying that. It's more money out of my pocket. I'd rather just have them pay it or roll it into the mortgage or whatever, and not have to worry about it. So that's making an offer. Next part is the inspection. So we kind of already touched on that. Really looking out for the big ticket items, like CapEx, things like that. And of course, your real estate agent will ideally be good and be able to look at those things with you. But a big note on the inspection: don't take it lightly. That with my first property that I bought, I got the inspection. There are a couple things that probably should have raised red flags, but I was so dead set on buying this property. I got the inspection back, and I had already put it under contract for asking price. So I had initially offered under asking, and then the property had been sitting on the market for 4 months. No one was trying to touch it, and then I went to go make an offer, and then my real estate agent said, "Oh, by the way, the seller said someone else just looked at it and they want to make an offer." And I was like, "Okay, well, I really want this property." And so I got emotional about it, and I said, "Okay, we'll just pay asking. Don't worry about negotiating, whatever." And then the inspection came back, and I didn't take it very seriously, and there are a couple things that I'm now paying for. So that was kind of one of my biggest mistakes, is I did not take the inspection seriously. So if there's something wrong with it, you're in a much better position if you either go to the seller and say, "Hey, you need to fix this," or have them give you a seller concession, which is where they take, this basically the equivalent dollar amount off the selling price, or back out of the deal, because it's not worth buying a property. I mean, run the numbers, but if you see the roof is bad and you're like, "Yeah, well, I'll figure it out. I just really want this property." And then 6 months later, the roof caves in and it's a $10,000 fix. Was it worth it? That's up for you to decide. But yeah, so that's kind of where I come from, the inspection. So take the inspection very seriously. And also with getting an inspection, ideally your real estate agent will know an inspector. So do that. And I'd also recommend being there for it. I was not there for the first one, and I just got like a PDF copy of it, and I kind of read through it, and I kind of just blew through it kind of quickly. Again, that was one of my bigger mistakes. So be there for the inspection, take it seriously, and actually work on repairs. Don't just think that it'll be okay, because odds are it won't. Next thing is the appraisal. So the appraisal is basically someone comes out and says, an appraiser comes out and says, "Okay, yes, this home is worth X," and that's based on comparables. So if you're buying a 4-bedroom, 2-bath home in this neighborhood, the appraiser will go and look at other 4-bed, 2-bath homes in that neighborhood that are in, similar condition, and say, "Okay, well, they all sold for this much, so the average price they sold for is this, therefore your house is worth this." Right? So if the appraisal comes back lower than what you have it under contract for, your bank, odds are, will not finance your price. They'll say you need to get it at the appraised value or come up with the difference in cash. So if you have it under contract for $210 and the appraiser comes in and says this is worth $200, the seller either needs to come down to $200 and meet you there, or you have to come up with an additional $10,000. So one of my good friends, actually, the appraisal came in lower than what she had it under contract for, and the seller then just came down and said, "Okay, well, we'll just sell it to you for this much." So that's the appraisal. That's another really important part. So the 3 main things once you found the property: make the offer, again, work on negotiating, try and do your best to have them cover closing costs, and don't forget everything's negotiable. So if you go in and there's nice furniture there, you can say, "Hey, I want to buy this house and I want the furniture," or "I want the closing date extended to 45 days, or little things like that. Just obviously, talk to your agent a little bit more, but everything's negotiable. Next part, inspection. Please take it seriously. Be on the lookout for capital expenditure items. Again, roof, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, water heaters. Basically the things that if they break are going to be expensive to repair. So that's big. And then the appraisal, that's something you just have to have. All banks are going to require that. And then I put in a section of do nots. So these are things you do not want to do when you're in the process of buying a home or you have a home under contract. Number one is do not touch credit. So don't go apply for a new loan. Don't go apply for a new credit card. Don't go, max out your credit cards because your rate, like your interest rate on the mortgage you're locked in at and your ability to qualify is heavily based on your credit. It's primarily based on your credit. So if you screw that up, that's going to screw up your whole loan process. So please don't do that. Don't go get a new car. Don't go get a new credit card. Just wait. Wait till you've closed on the house, have the house, live in it for a bit, and then you can go get new credit cards and go get a new car. Second one is don't switch jobs. This one is another big one. So don't switch jobs in the sense of, the bank is lending to you based on your income and based on the job you have. If you have a home under contract and then you go switch jobs, they're going to be like, whoa, hold up. You don't have the same income you had, or you don't have the same job you had. I don't know if we can do this. And then it's a whole process and you don't want to deal with that. The only time when switching jobs would be okay is kind of what happened in my position. Speak to your lender first, but I was getting a promotion within the same company, and it came with a pay increase. So that's not going to negatively impact me. But if I went from being a general manager of a gym to, I don't know, like an auto technician or something, or I don't know, or like a sales rep for a company or work at a call center, like things like that, that would totally screw up the process. So don't do that. Buy the house. And the last one is spend too much. So obviously we talked about closing costs and we talked about the down payment. You will get the exact dollar amount pretty close to the closing date. I know one of the properties that I was going to buy that ended up fell through because a week prior to closing, my lender, who I no longer work with, sent me the updated closing documents, and it was $6,000 more than I was planning on putting down. That completely threw it off for me. I was not planning on doing that. I didn't have that money readily available for that purpose, so I had to back out, and I unfortunately lost my earnest money. So don't spend too much. If your lender initially tells you need $10,000 at closing, plan for more. Don't just keep $10,000. Because I know we talked about last time, having the down payment, having the closing costs, having reserves, all that kind of stuff. Don't blow through that. Okay, that money sits in a separate account that you don't get to touch. It's only for the house, and just please keep it there. So do not spend too much. So those are 3 things you definitely want to watch out for. And then pretty much once you've been through all these things, they've accepted the offer, you got the inspection, got the appraisal, and then you go to the closing table. You basically go to an attorney's office or whatever, sit down, sign some papers. Took me, 20 minutes. They walk you through the whole thing. You get a copy of it, you get the keys, and then you're a homeowner. And honestly, I gotta say, like when I bought my triplex up in Hendersonville, my first ever property, the one I screwed up on with the inspection, the day I finished my closing documents was one of the best days. It was so surreal because that was my first real property. Well, not my first real, that was my first property. I don't know why I said my first real property. That was my first property. I was officially a homeowner, officially a multifamily investor. And because it was a triplex, I got the keys to 3 units and there were 3 copies of each key. So the guy gave me a bag with 9 keys in it, all those little tags on it. And a super cool thing was I closed in like the middle of the month. So I got checks at closing. I got checks at the closing table. I got the security deposit from the current tenants, and I got prorated rent. So this is a cool little thing. So if you do go buy a multifamily, you'll get this too if it's currently rented. So typically your first mortgage payment, mortgage payments are due on the 1st, right? Usually, let's just say you close on like April 15th or whatever. Your first mortgage payment won't be May 1st. It'll probably be June 1st. So usually you get like, I don't want to say a month free, but you usually don't have your first payment for at least until not the first coming up, but the next one. And so I got the security deposits, which I can't spend. I can't spend that. It's not my money, but I got those. I got checks for that, and I got checks for prorated rent. So, and I didn't have a mortgage payment for, I think it was 42 days or something like that. So I got like $800 in rent, plus then, whatever, 10 to 15 days later, I got more rent. And then I didn't have my first security deposit, or I didn't have my first mortgage payment due for 40 days. And so it was so cool. So if you're buying a multifamily that's currently rented, depending on what time of the month, you should get prorated rent and the security deposits. You'll get checks, you'll get keys. It was a surreal experience, and I remember like I could not stop smiling on my way to go just look at it. I remember like walking through, I was filming on Instagram. I took a video walkthrough of it, and I went back to work because this was on my lunch break. I went back to work with this huge grin on my face, and I walked in and I was like, guess who's officially a homeowner? And I walked around like high-fiving everyone, getting congrats and stuff. So that was super cool. So when you buy your first property, it's definitely a surreal experience. It's one of the coolest things. I've bought 3 properties so far. Every time I close on it, it's still so much fun. Nothing beats the first one, but it's all a lot of fun. And I really enjoy it. So anyway, that's that. I'll just get off my ramble. But so buying your first property, part 2. That's all the information I want you guys to think about. If you guys are looking for properties, comment down below. Let me know. Let's chat about it. I'd love to hear more about it. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. If you're listening on the podcasts, pretty please toss me a 5-star review. It really helps out. And I will see you guys in the next episode. And again, this is Eric McAvoy with Your Road to Financial Freedom, signing off.